This week on The Nightlife, more Pathfinder 2nd Edition combat and tactics, tips and tricks for your next battle. Welcome back to Knights of Last Call. I'm your game master, Derek Melenda, and I'm here today with the rest of the Knights to talk about more combat and tactics for your Pathfinder 2nd Edition game. Last time, we covered 3 basic tips around movement and how you can use those movement actions in order to give your team advantages in combat, as well as to deny your opponent actions. So this week, we're going to focus on 3 more tips that'll help improve your game. Now, Tim, we were just talking here before the cameras rolled about how, you know, the role of actions as it relates to a spellcaster. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that most spells take 2 actions.
That's right.
So do you feel like as a spellcaster that using your actions is harder or easier than it would be for, let's say, a more martially inclined character?
I think a lot of the times it's a lot easier to get through my actions. There's a lot of turns. I think, we've joked about it in the Discord before, and, just how, hey, Tim's turns are like 10 seconds because he's like, haste on Azius, shoot an arrow, go, right? And sometimes, I've made myself to have that strike option as an extra option. There's a lot of times you have to move. So, and I think there's a lot of good one action options out there, like focus spells, shield, all great things.
Yeah. So. Now, and Matt, you were nodding your head, so you also agree.
Yeah, for as a sorcerer, the first 2 actions are always going to be cast a spell, and then there's that one leftover action, and maybe it is move, maybe it's command lucky, maybe it's do a cantrip to cause something, but it's for me it's always the big spell, and then what's the other thing that's going to happen?
Right. So you're really just thinking about 2 things.
Yeah. What's the big thing? What's the secondary or supplementary thing?
Right. Now, Bob.
What's a spellcaster?
Right. So, Bob, last time when we talked about combat and tactics, we talked a little bit about defensive movement. Mm-hmm. And, your character, a barbarian, actually has really fast movement.
Yes. Fast movement.
So let me ask you this question. Where do you think the line should be drawn between, right, you're a barbarian, you're in combat, you're raging. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Should your character be defensively moving?
Or if he's raging?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
He probably should be like berserker.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point, right? Which is we're going to talk about these combat and tactics. We're kind of talking about the game like it's kind of like a board game or a video game. But that's what makes role-playing games really cool and unique. And if you've seen any of our other videos about role-playing, you'll know that it's not always about making the optimal choice, right? It's about making the fun choice.
Well, to be fair, I don't defensively move because I just don't do that. That's not in my nature.
Right. Well,
I probably should be.
I mean, if you want to be a better player, you should probably.
I don't know. Yeah. I'm learning from these tips like you're learning from these tips.
But, keep in mind that philosophy also does not mean that you have to go get your character killed.
Very true.
Because he's like, I'm going to charge to the caster past those 8 melee guys. It's like, you slow down. You don't have to do that, right? Like, all you have to do is, you can still play tactically if you want.
Yeah.
You're not forced to be reckless every time just because your character has the rage ability.
Now, Nick, your character kind of has the opposite problem. You're a little slow.
I'm very slow.
Yeah, your character's
I am the tank.
You're a human in full plate, basically, right?
Yep. So I don't move very fast at all, even with my fleet.
Right, and you took the fleet feat.
I took the fleet feat, and it's still I'm slow.
Yeah, so a lot of times you're moving twice sometimes, right,
yes.
to make one attack. And so I think one of the things that could be frustrating is and if you watched our last actual play, there was a turn where you didn't make an attack because it was more important that you stayed close to your allies.
Correct.
And so positioning sometimes means not making an attack, right?
And that's the thing about the paladin, though, too, is that I have a lot of reactions. So I may not use my actions to maybe attack, but I may have to move to be better positioned with my spellcasters to help protect them with my reactions. And then that's where I help save some damage from them. And I also am able to then potentially even strike back at the enemies.
Right. So today, we're going to cover 3 more tips as we sort of kind of keep going deeper and deeper into the Pathfinder 2nd Edition onion. So one of the first things we kind of focused on melee. We talked about flanking and we talked about moving around to avoid attacks. But spellcasters are a big part of the game too. We got a couple of comments. Thank you so much from people asking for some spellcaster tips and tricks. And so today I thought we would start off here with tip number 4, which is identify and learn your foe's weak saves and their strong saves. There are 3 save types in Pathfinder: Fortitude, Reflex, and Will. And those kind of represent 3 different capabilities of a monster to avoid an attack from a spellcaster. And the fact is, if you go through the books, if you go through the math, most monsters have 1 save that they are particularly good at, and they have 1 save that they kind of stink at. And it could be a huge difference. It can be sometimes as many as 3, 4, or even 6 points, depending on the monster. That's a huge difference. That could be the difference between a monster passing a save on a 14 plus versus an 8 plus. It's a really, really big difference, to say nothing of critical fails and things like that and critical successes. And so one of the keys as a spellcaster is you need to make sure you know what those saves are. As a game master, nothing is more painful for me than when I see a spellcaster, because spells are limited. Mm-hmm. And it takes 2 actions, and a spellcaster is getting really excited, right? Because they're about to cast the fortitude spells, that they're really excited to cast on this monster, and I'm sitting here looking and seeing this creature has an unbelievable fortitude save, and it's pretty much going to definitely pass. And so you need to either use your intuition, right? And this is where I talk about like monsters, hopefully. By looking at them, listening to the description, seeing the way that they play.
That's what I need to learn more. Like, oh, that's a big guy.
Right. If I tell you, right, if I show you there's a big hulking giant, the intuition should be this creature probably has a good fort save.
Yeah. So, if they take up more than 1 square.
Yeah. You'll notice over the next few APs, most of Guldor's spells are mind affecting. Because I knew we were fighting a lot of big, dumb giants who do not have strong will saves.
So that's good. That's how you prepare.
Yeah. And Tim got it exactly right, which is if you know you're going to be, part of this game is not just tactical. It's called combat and tactics, but some of it is strategic. If you know you're going to be fighting certain types of monsters, you need to prepare certain types of spells. At the same time, it's a good idea as a spellcaster to have a variety of spell types memorized each day. This is not as much of an option when you're lower level, but as you get into 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th level and you start picking up multiple levels of spells, if you're a sorcerer, you have a variety of spells. Try not to make them all target the same save. Yep. Because then if you come up across a creature, which, for example, if Tim took all of these will saves, but then you fight something that's mindless and cannot be even affected by will saves, well, that kind of leaves them useless. Up the creek without a paddle, right?
Which is why Guldor does not have entirely mind-affecting spells, but
just a lot of them.
And so you can use your intuition. If it's a nimble, panther-like creature, it's probably got a good will, or probably reflex save. If it's a hulking big brute, probably a good fortitude save. If it's a keen-minded wizard or cleric, probably a good will save. So you can use your intuition, but if you don't have your intuition or you can't tell, use recall knowledge.
And this is what I need to do better. 'Cause whenever I recall knowledge, people watching AP my notes, I'm like, I want to know his AC.
Right.
I want to know his hit points.
Right.
Or his attack. I'm like,
as if that somehow mattered.
Back again. I'm going to do this, but I'm getting better now. And as I'm realizing stuff, I'm like, I'm going to hit. I'm a melee character. What do I care what his AC is? I'm going to hit or a miss. Why do I care what his HP is? I should be helping you guys. I should be helping the team inform more about immunities, resistances, and of course his saves.
Right.
I think it's huge.
Yeah, and Matt, you got it exactly right? Which is, what difference does it make, right?
Yeah, you're going to attack no matter what. Like, his AC was 24. Well, I guess I won't attack. I'll just sit down.
Yeah.
You're still going to go and attack.
Now I guess I'll use all my other options.
Now I know what I need to roll, but I still need to roll that in order to actually
20
hit.
or 30, I'm still going to roll it.
Yeah, it's not going to change your action.
Correct.
Right? You're still going to make your attack with your axe. You're still going to make your attack with your sword. You're still going to make your attack with your hammer, and you're going against armor class. You don't have a choice.
Right. Whereas for spellcasters, extraordinarily relevant.
Especially if it's one action to do the recall knowledge. So if I can learn as a spellcaster on your turn,
absolutely,
or if I have to do it on my own turn, but on your turn, I learn that they're weak to fortitude,
or have fire resistance or something like that. You're like,
and that's
maybe
another
not
thing
fireball.
that I think is why it's very easy to use my 3rd action as a spellcaster. Recall knowledge. I cast a spell, buff a party member or something, and then I'm like, I don't know much about that thing. Recall knowledge. Let's see if I can learn something.
Now, can you say something specific like, Derek, I'd like to know if this monster, what of the 3?
There, a lot of the recall knowledge skill ability in the core rulebook is kind of open to interpretation. It can be a very specific question. Some GMs like myself play it pretty broadly and give a lot of information with a recall knowledge check, usually like divided into sort of offensive, defensive, and miscellaneous other types of abilities. And I like to give, because again, a theme you'll see with me is I like my players to have information. I like for my players to be making informed choices. I think that increases the fun of the game and it avoids sort of gotcha moments. Because, Bob, you made a really great point. We're talking about saves and identifying which ones are weak and strong so that you can target the weak one and avoid spells that have the save one. But immunities and resistances are like basically like having an infinite save. So if you know that a creature is immune to, let's say, fire, well, that's going to save your spellcasters a lot of heartache when they don't use a fire spell against it.
Now, is that better at lower levels, though? The resistances are pretty minor, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or
I mean, it all scales. I mean,
like I don't know much about the best year.
I think what you mean is they're probably less common on
maybe
low
that's what I'm
level
thinking.
monsters.
Besides like boss types, but like
no, I mean it definitely. I mean, because with lower levels you tend to fight more generic humanoids, and generic humanoids, your orc, your gnoll, your goblin, they don't have anything special.
Yeah, then we started running into trolls and stuff, and I'm like,
but
fire elementals.
Yeah, we need to know
you can
these
figure
things.
that out.
Yeah.
They're probably going to be immune to fire because they're a fire elemental.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, they might even heal off of it.
Right. So
depending on what game you're playing.
Yeah, and so that's where that intuitive sense can come in, right? And then also too, there could be certain things like once you fought a demon or a devil or fae, and you learn, oh, okay, all demons have this resistance and all demons have this weakness. Then the next time you fight a demon, even if it's a different type of demon, you can say, oh, I remember from the last time that they are strong against.
You recalled your knowledge,
and but you
without taking the action.
Yeah, without taking the action. And to the point about you using a recall knowledge, Tim, on your turn as a spellcaster, keep in mind that if you get to like cast a spell and then maybe move or do something else. So if you have to use your recall knowledge, it's kind of a big ask for you because you kind of basically only get 2 actions on your turn. One of them is just a big action to cast a spell. But, for a melee character, it's like, oh, I'm going to move and attack. I kind of do have this third action that's just laying around. And that's where recall knowledge.
Yeah, instead of making a third attack at a -10 or whatever penalty.
And make no mistake.
I thought it was so cool using my third action to recall knowledge, but then I was asking for AC. I'm like, I think I lost being cool there real quick.
Yeah, and to be clear, and also to be clear, if you are good at the game and you have this player skill that you know what the monster's weakness is to, I think that's okay. I think that's like, it's like, hey, I didn't have to use an action. As a group, we didn't have to use an action because the player at the table said, hey, remember these guys are weak to electricity. Use your lightning bolts. That's awesome. And it's like, wow, I'm glad I'm playing with Tim, and Tim knows that and brought that.
That just depends on how deep you guys are into the role playing.
Yeah,
but I think that way's a lot more fun.
Yeah, but that also just kind of is, if you're playing a character, this is role playing, right? So if you've experienced those in the past,
then it's for sure.
That's what I mean. So it's absolutely,
but
you've experienced that.
Tim's knowledge of RPGs is so much higher than mine. He knows what a ghoul does before I know what a ghoul does.
That still applies.
That's where it gets weird because Bob, you have an expertise in fitness and strength gaining. So should you be able to convince the characters to do things that are stronger related or strength related because you have the knowledge of how to, how
one may argue.
How come one's wisdom can bleed into the game and one's charisma perhaps can bleed into the game?
Well, that's my thing about how deep are you role playing? But anyway, that's off topic.
I would argue, is it more likely for me to know everything about a monster in this game, or is it more likely for my character to know everything about very common monsters that an adventurer will encounter in his lifetime?
I agree with that.
To be at whatever.
So, which actually is more intuitive?
Checks out.
All right. So again, that's sort of our first tip for spellcasters, but that is going to be make sure that you have a wide variety of spells that target different saving throws and that you either know or use recall knowledge to identify which are those weak saves so that you can make sure that you can target those with the appropriate spell. Our second tip today is sort of going from talking about flanking from our first tip and start sort of expanding the scope of the game. And that's going to be talking about bonus types. So what is a bonus type? Well, a bonus type is a type of penalty or bonus that you can have on your character at one time. In the game, there are 3 types of bonuses or penalties. There are item bonuses and item penalties, which are typically given to you from, no big surprise here,
items.
an item. And as such, they tend to be something that's pretty permanent to your character. Your character's magic weapon, their magic armor. These are things that give your character an item bonus. I would even go further, by the way, to say that an item penalty is probably about one of the rarest things in the game. And you're very, very, very rarely, if ever, going to be able to apply an item penalty to your foe. It'd be like, I have this cursed armor, and I'm going to, force it on to my...
Convince you to wear it.
The other two types of bonuses are circumstance and status. Circumstance bonuses usually result as a result of the circumstance that you find your character in. So, for example, being flat-footed gives your enemy a -2 circumstance penalty to their armor class. There are also certain feats or special abilities that can give a circumstance bonus. For example, Aid, which we've talked about in a past video, grants a circumstance bonus to a character's attack roll because your buddy is helping you out, and that's the circumstance. The status bonus typically comes from spells. Status bonus comes from spells like Heroism, Bless, or the Bard's Inspire Courage cantrip, whereas status penalties come from conditions like Sickened or Frightened, and typically are created through using Demoralize as a skill, or using a spell like Fear, or a spell like Stinking Cloud, which can affect you with Sickened condition. Now, what does all this mean? What it means is you cannot create a bonus that is going to stack with the same bonus of the same type. So I can get a +1 status bonus to my character's attack roll. But if I get another +1 status bonus to my character's attack roll, they don't add up. You can only have one status bonus. You get the highest one, but you only get one. So what that means is in order to maximize your character's chances, whether it's landing an attack roll or landing a spell, you want to put as many bonuses on you and your party as possible and put as many penalties onto the enemy as possible. But again, the enemy's penalties don't stack either. Mm-hmm. So the best example of this is flanking. We've discussed this before, that when two characters flank an enemy, that enemy is flat-footed to those characters. That means they get a -2 circumstance penalty to its armor class, which is great.
Mm-hmm. To those characters.
Correct. Now, you could trip that monster, and that monster would become prone. And now the creature is on the ground, prone, and it gets flat-footed, which makes it a -2 circumstance penalty to its armor class. But it already has a -2 circumstance penalty to its armor class because of being flanked. So for you, the characters that are in that combat, it doesn't really make much of a difference.
But then if he's down the ground, he's flat-footed to everyone.
Yes.
So that's the bonus.
No, that is true. That is true. A flank, and this was something that someone brought up in a comment. When you are flanking a creature, it is flat-footed only to the individuals who are flanking it. Whereas if a creature is prone, it is flat-footed to everyone. But in that particular situation, that circumstance penalty is already in effect. So giving a creature another circumstance penalty doesn't really hurt it that much. In fact, it doesn't hurt it at all. What you need to do at that point is figure out a way to give it a status penalty. And the easiest and most common way to do this in the game is through the Frightened condition. The Frightened condition applies a -X status penalty to a monster where X is equal to the level of its Frightened status. And the easiest way to do that is with the Demoralize. That's a skill that you can use in combat, part of Intimidate, does not have the attack tag, so multiple attack penalty doesn't do it. And it's a great thing to do with your third action. But my recommendation is that you do it first. I've done this mistake a bunch of times where I will have a creature or a monster attack or move and then attack one of my players, and then I'll demoralize it, and which gives it a penalty. You do it the other opposite order, right? So that way they have the penalty to attack when you're in armor class when you're attacking them.
There's also something very important to think about when you're dealing with the Frightened condition is that you shouldn't do it right before the monster's turn that you're frightening, because the Frightened condition reduces at the end of their turn. So you're not actually helping your party out at all if the last thing you do on your turn is frighten the enemy who goes next.
Yeah, so all that's to say, the reason, though, that we're trying to get these penalties so that I can get that AC down a little bit.
Right, yeah.
Because I want to crit.
Correct.
I want to hit that one attack the best that I can do, and the more bonuses or debuffs that you can stack on that enemy, which I've learned throughout this that it is incredible to do, the easier and the more percentageal chance that I can to crit, which I think is the way I need to do it.
But it also doesn't just affect your chances of critting. It also affects the monster's chances of doing stuff to the rest of the party as well.
Correct.
So the penalties don't just apply when you are doing something towards the enemy. It also applies as well to when the enemy wants to do something towards you.
Yep.
So now that AC,
Sorry, yeah,
that
I'm one-minded.
Yeah.
Can I hit him harder? That's usually how I go.
And then there's, and again, there are spells. There's obviously spells like fear, which apply the frightened condition. But Tim, there's feats that can. There's feats.
I know where we're going with this now.
Right. You got to look in the book to find ways. It's just like we were talking about with the spellcasters. They need to have ways to affect fort, ref, and will. Your character should have ways to buff your party with circumstance bonuses and with status bonuses and with item bonuses. And you should have ways to affect the enemy with circumstance penalties and status penalties. And sometimes it's spells, but sometimes it's also like a skill feat.
That's right. You got to pay attention to the skill feats. Don't overlook them. It's one action. It's called Bon Mot. And it is probably my the most entertaining diplomacy-based feat I've ever seen. But what it does is it lets your character make a insulting quip against a foe, and it gives them a penalty to their will save, and it has a couple other things that I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment, but it's surprisingly effective, and it's another great way to use one action. It doesn't have anything to do with attacking penalties. Like, it's just a fantastic option that'll debuff the monster against your entire party.
I like that the enemy has to insult you back though to get rid of it.
Correct.
It's so funny.
Yeah,
it's such a funny thing.
They can make a retort.
Yeah.
So if it's a
attempt
character
to-
with low charisma, they just can't. They're stuck.
Correct.
You are
Yeah.
a meanie.
Well, and Large does it too, right? If I'm reading this correctly, it gives a status bonus to melee damage.
To damage, correct.
Yeah. And that's what you use all the time on my character, which
Yeah.
I think is awesome.
Yeah,
Well, and
and-
it's also interesting with the, I got messed up about item bonuses for a long time with the Druid's Wild Shape in this, because the Wild Shape ability, functions like Polymorph, which explicitly states that you can't get item bonuses. So even if I cast Magic Fang on myself, since it gives me an item bonus, I can't gain that in Wild Shape form. Now, Wild Shape form's balanced around that, but
Yeah, and
it's
that,
an interesting thing.
It's a good point too from a combat and tactics. Not just for your advantage, but also to make sure you're playing the game right, right? Which is
Yeah.
it can be very easy to I add this and I add this and I add this, and maybe your GM is doing it or maybe your player is doing it, and you're much more powerful than the game expected you
Right.
to be.
I get a circumstance bonus of plus 12.
Yeah,
I
right.
win.
But to really highlight this, let's take an example of where you have a foe, and that foe has been flanked. And so it is now flat-footed and has a -2 circumstance penalty to its armor class. And then Gwildor hits it with a fear spell. And the creature critically fails and becomes frightened 2, which is a -2 status penalty to pretty much everything, but including its armor class. So that creature, that's a status penalty and that's a circumstance penalty, so those will stack. It now has a -4 penalty to its armor class. But on the other side, maybe a friendly cleric in the party or another spellcaster hits Asius with a heroism spell. That gives him a +1 status bonus to his attack rolls. So now the creature has 4 penalty and Asius has +1 status bonus to attack. But then Burl aids him with a well-timed flickering bolt of fire, which he uses as an aid action, and he critically succeeds at the aid action and grants him a +2 circumstance bonus to his next attack roll. That monster now has a -4 AC,
Oh my gosh, someone's a crit.
and Asius has a +3 to his next attack roll. That's a 7-point difference.
In addition to everything else that you already have.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
And so if you would normally have hit that creature on a 10, you now hit that creature on a 3.
Yeah.
And when we talked before about missing sucking, I agree that there's some elements to that, but Pathfinder 2nd Edition kind of helps you do that, which is meaning avoid missing. Because if you play smart and you make those decisions, you could take something which is a coin flip. I need a 10 or better on a D20. Oh, I got this bonus. I need a 3.
You're effectively stacking the deck.
Absolutely.
And then you start to look at your second or third attack, even with the penalties.
That's
when
correct.
When you can get that much of an advantage, like -5 turns into -1 or something.
that's
Like,
All of a
that's
sudden,
all right.
your third attack is just as good as your first attack would have been.
Correct. So,
true.
right, so
Yeah, very
properly
true.
stacking up those bonuses can be absolutely huge. And so when you're building your character and when you're playing in the combat, you want to look for opportunities to gain the bonuses of different types and to apply the penalties to your the enemies or monsters of different types.
Don't undervalue things like Flurry of Maneuvers for the monk, who
Right.
can, instead of Flurry of Blows, trip and grapple.
Yeah, it was like Wolf
Yeah,
Drag did the same thing.
When I played a monk, there's the very first class, I thought it was silly. And looking back on it, I'm like, that's probably one of the most powerful things that you could do.
Yeah, and Tim's kind of giving you a sneak preview for our next video where we are going to cover grapple, trip, shove, all of that, disarm, all of the sort of combat athletic actions that you can take as sort of a way to use those to maximum benefit. So
Stay tuned.
yeah, definitely stay tuned for more. So we hope you're enjoying this series here of combat and tactics. We hope to come up with one of these at least a couple times a month. And again, leave comments below about some of your ideas. Again, we heard a request for a spellcaster tip, so we gave a spellcaster tip. So we're listening, and of course, if you want to continue this conversation with us real time, please join our Patreon. We have a Discord. We have some exclusive Patreon features that we have for our members, and we really appreciate all the support. All right. Any final thoughts or words for our combat and tactics audience?
No, as a barbarian, just anything I can do to get that penalty lower, my bonus up, including knock him down, is good in my book.
Awesome. Well, for the Knights of Last Call, my name is Derek Melinda saying thank you so much and welcome to the Knights of Last Call.